Hello there, welcome to Weird Music on the Glumburger channel. This is of course a show where we have weird reviews of all different sorts of kinds of music usually. We're looking at a bunch of different things I hope, but usually we seem to be looking at loud heavy metal stuff and minimal ambient stuff. Today it's the former though, with a look at what is easily one of my favourite releases of this year, and an album that carries with it such a devastating yet really unusually uplifting message. So today I present to you the phenomenal Hellish Form with a look at the 2023 album Deathless. So of course, let's ask ourselves, who are Hellish Form? Well, Hellish Form is a duo made up of members Willow Ryan, performing guitar, synth, vocals and lyrics, and Jacob Lee, performing guitar, bass, vocals and mixing duties. There's also some programmed drums on the album, which I found out from asking the band, but I didn't check to see who provided them, so my apologies. Also, to quickly mention, Willow goes by they/them pronouns, exactly like myself if you didn't know, which I guess just never came up in any of my videos until this very point, which is kind of odd, but I'm weird like that. And Jacob goes by he/him, which I think is important to know when it comes to this band, to be fair, especially when it concerns the themes that this album's covering, but more on that later. And so, together the duo have pushed out these incredible albums of cataclysmic funeral doom, offset by these wonderful elements of sludge music, and maybe even arguably black metal in terms of the vocal style. I'm not 100% sure, I refer to it a lot as that, but maybe that's my ignorance coming in, who knows. Anyway, today we're looking at their latest album release of Deathless, a 4-track album of incredible doom that pulverizes with such horrific disdain at the world around us, whilst still yearning for hope, I would argue. And it is an experience that is truly ecstatic at times, and it reminds me a lot of the kind of thing that the band Agriculture have been making a name for, in this past year, with this incredibly dirgy music, bringing with it a kind of odd sense of joy at times in amongst the chaos and the depression and stuff. And so just to briefly mention it before we go into its 4 tracks, Deathless is described on the Bandcamp page with just a single line of explanation going as follows: a judgement of the purveyors of systemic transphobia and a balm to those suffering beneath its hold. And so I mention this not just because it's incredibly important to the overall themes of the album, of course, but also because it's important to consider as well, especially when listening to this album. You see it straddling the line between such terrifying destruction and immense beauty. You get these incredibly loud, doomy instrumentals that are offset by the shrieking screams of vocalist Willow Ryan, who expresses this incredible narrative that studies the current climate regarding the trans community in, well, I say America, but probably the whole world as well, actually, let's be honest with ourselves. It results in a truly powerful album experience that just amazes me every single time I hear it, so let's dive into it, shall we? So Deathless opens up with the title track of Deathless, which immediately paves the way for some monolithic dirgy doom as the guitars just ring out with this metallic buzz, backed up by the glorious tones of these synths that just triumphantly elevate the track to these really beautiful places. And it's a wonderfully drawn out opener that slowly burns before it paves the way for these incredibly huge shrieking vocal performance from one Willow Ryan, backed up by the incredibly slow doomy instrumentals. And it's interesting because I described the vocal performance
performance as being, black metal style, and it's just so shrieking and high pitched. And amongst those instrumentals, it just gives it a wonderful sense of presence amongst the entire song and across the entire album as well. There's just something so ecstatic, so triumphant, and yet so full of tragedy, devastation, and mourning as the song just slowly pushes itself forward. And I love the really huge fuzzy instrumentals that are so satisfying and just perfect in the mix. There's some truly wonderful little motifs here and there, from slow little guitar solos to the twinkling of gentle piano notes, which is perhaps just a setting of the synths, but is what it is. But it all culminates in this really cohesive track, though, that just pummels with its incredibly unusual metal aesthetics. And so, one thing I'm finding interesting about the black metal genre, just to go back into it briefly, as somebody who's slowly trying to open up their world to it, is how embedded in the shrieking high-pitched vocal performances, of which, genuinely carry this real urgent sense of desperate emotion, you get these really interesting and rather intense lyrics, at the core of it all. And so, when it comes to the vocal performance, it's very hard to discern what is being said. You get the emotion really comes forward in it, or you really get that sense of the emotional impact of it. But what's being said, is difficult to really work out. So you have to, go the extra step yourself as a listener. And so when listening to the track and reading the lyrics, it's very interesting as at times you can hear some of the words, but other times it just feels like a manic scream going beyond comprehensible words. But regardless of it though, it's still an expression of a story or a concept, and the opening track of Deathless tells us a very interesting story of what I interpret to just be an exaltation of non-existence, that love, grace, pain and joy exist beyond our mortal realm, and it's something that can never be destroyed. And I thought it'd be interesting, to read my favourite portion of the lyrics, which might be an odd thing to do, but I thought it might better help get a sense of, my feelings about the track, if that makes sense. And so my favourite part of Deathless is the part where the lyrics go, "You kick and scream, tear your soul, devoted to doctrines 1,000 years old. You kill and hurt because you can't control. You can take my life, but I am deathless. You will never erase the love and grace, the pain and joy, the life lived, a life that mattered, a life I carry on my shoulders every day." And I find it to be a very rather impactful set of lyrics, truth be told. And I love the vocal delivery of it, from Willow. Their screams, just this high-pitched shrieking, that climbs so far and high, stood so far above the instrumentals that, just those doomy, dirgy instrumentals, of course. And to me, I just love how the lyrics express that sense, of just, regardless of this, this systemic transphobia, you can't beat us, you can't bring us down because we're beyond that, if that makes sense. And it results altogether, it just results in this phenomenal album opener that sounds so incredibly huge and grandiose, whilst carrying with it such heavy, weighty, and melancholy. It's truly wonderful stuff. So we move on to track 2. Transfigure, which is perhaps one of my favourite tracks on all of Deathless, and this one features that incredibly slow, doomy, monolithic crawl pushed out by those really fuzz guitars and the slow tempo of the programmed drums. But there's a wonderful bit, right after the intro where the synths, right after that sort of fuzzy bit, you just get this synth section that sounds so full of pain and anguish with the very descent on the notes themselves, and it's just like ba 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 da, that lands on it, and it's so impactful when it does, And of course, how can we not actually mention the vocal performance from Jacob Lee at this point, though, who opens up this track with his incredibly guttural growl that's so low on the registers, coming across as this really intimidating and ferocious force. before it then leads the way for that, that now customary shrieking from Willow Ryan. And I love the contrast between their vocal styles here. Willow's got the high-pitched one, and then Jacob's got all the way down here, and they just counteract each other in this really interesting way. It makes the song so interesting, I feel. And I think it all culminates into something truly brilliant, though. A track that's so loud and distorted and full of really painful, anguished emotion that is desperate to express something amidst the turmoil in this world. And of course, looking at the lyrics here, I find this one to be an incredibly emotional experience, as we're given this expression of love and admiration that won't be destroyed by the world around us, that you shouldn't let them steal your love and beauty through their actions and word, and instead celebrate your identity, who you are and what you can be. And I love the allusions and references to the Transfigure chorus in this track, with the concept of transfiguration being this transformative thing of you turning into the very person you deserve to be. And it becomes this incredibly joyous and ecstatic thing that, pushes through the incredibly depressing dirge that the instrumentals offer, to instead celebrate the fact that people like this exist and will exist and, are full of love and joy for being who they are. And I love the ending of the lyrics as well, just to go back to it. My favourite lines, being the end, where a couple of brief lines saying, "They will never understand. They are empty of dreams. Locked away with their humanity, they will never come to terms with the discordance in their soul." So yeah, I do love how this particular line just sort of closes off the song. It's such I would call it a devastating judgment of these purveyors of systemic transphobia, and just really just like drilling the nail into them with turning the judgment onto them in a weird way. I love it though how they've described it, especially discordance in their soul. What a beautiful way to describe it, I feel. And it feels like the overall experience of this track though, it's very representative of that small portion of text, suggesting that the album is a balm to those suffering, and it showcases as well though how incredibly loud, intimidating funeral doom can result in something that is genuinely, truly beautiful in its own right. Moving right along, we get to the longest track on this album, the 16-minute Texas is Sinking. And this one really gets to me, I feel. Musically, it is a perfect blending of the sludge metal styles and with the incredibly slow tempo of doom music, with the distorted, fuzzed-out guitars, of course, just ringing out brilliantly amongst those slow, monolithic programmed drums that push so slowly, I feel. And it's so huge, so bombastic almost, and the riff itself just falls so brilliantly on this final notes that just drone out so amazingly, carrying with it that immense and heavy weight as it continues to just sustain the electrics, But I love how throughout this track, the guitars are playing this very slow guitar lead that feels so immensely emotional, as though we're witnessing something truly terrible before our very eyes. And so then the lyrics, of course. I believe this one's expresses to me such horror and disdain at the systemic transphobia existing within America, referencing Texas itself, and how as a country there's perhaps this dominating force that brutalizes and dehumanizes those within the trans community, all in the name of, well, almost nothing really, I would argue. In the name of God, in the name of America, people say this, but do they mean it? Does it really represent that? I don't know. But there's some truly powerful lyrical moments on this one, such as the point when Willow screams out the line, "America opens its jaws wide, eager to feed on its most vulnerable." And this is a line that gets to me, every time I hear it, truth be told, just so, there's something so just depressing and sad about, the truth of it, that the whole system is designed to just prey upon those who need help, and instead it just makes things worse and worse for them. But to go back to the song though, from here the song just continues to push along, leading to these interesting abstract instrumental sections of these really long droning elements that feels like moments of contemplation, I would say. Moments where we, consider just what is happening in the, to the world around us, essentially, before we get introduced back to that really slow, dirgy riff that's so powerful and intimidating. And here, Jacob Lee performs vocals again, does that guttural growl that sounds so intimidating yet so brilliant, of course. And it all just leads up to this, this beautiful final vocal performance from Willow, which then ends on an incredibly depressing and tragic note in the lyrics, where they say, "The world doesn't want us. We don't belong. It's not just Texas. The earth has been overrun. A mask covers our face, disguising pain with rage. We have no choice. It's love or death. Texas is sinking. America is sinking." And I think there's something truly tragic about that. I feel as though it's been, beautifully expressed in the lyrics here from Willow, who just it's expressing just almost a disbelief at the current state of the world, but also a determination to push through and continue to love in spite of this terribly overwhelming force, and it's a gut-wrencher of a track, both in terms of the lyrical content, but also the instrumentals as well, that, just push along this incredibly dense and heavy sound, and to me it's a truly phenomenal track that blows me away each and every time I hear it, just truly phenomenal stuff. So, we move on to the final track of Deathless, the shortest track on the album, the 7.5 minute long Pink Tears. And so after the incredibly emotional journey we've undergone, we have one final track to close it off, which does so in, as you guess, an incredibly impactful fashion, of course. And much like the previous tracks on this album, there's this immense and powerful weight to the instrumentals that push along that doomy style so brilliantly. And I'm very fond of the guitar line just sustaining across those dirgy, doomy bass notes that are pushing the whole thing along. It's a lovely little guitar part that feels very emotional, much like the whole album, truth be told, of course. But there's something about it all that just really gets to me. This one also heavily features the synth, which almost continues what the guitar established at the start of this track. It pushes it all along with that powerful sense of emotion until it suddenly just leads way to this very peculiar section that sounds nothing like anything we've heard on this album. An unusual yet wonderfully clean guitar tone offset by these lovely warm synth moments. And it really changes the vibe up. But it's one that works brilliantly on the album and expresses something very emotional indeed, especially when those synths continue to drone and you get this piano effect just pushing it back along, before the heavy distorted bass and guitars just come back in, accompanied by the another amazing vocal performance, but I think this one's from Jacob Lee this time. But maybe it's actually Willow screaming in a slightly lower register. It's hard to say for sure, but either way, brilliant stuff, truly brilliant stuff. But it's wonderful. The performance just pushes the closer out towards the end, and when you look at the lyrics on this one, I find this one to be an oddly comforting track in a weird way that expresses love and admiration for those within the trans community who feel so alone, so scared, and so pushed towards death itself, which is a very terrifying concept. But it culminates in this truly beautiful outro section where they express it all through the words. "You're not lost as you wander the empty streets for a place to sleep. The rain is falling, but I'll be there if you need. Tell me you love me, tell me you care. You look at me, I wipe your pink tears." And I think the sentiment behind it is a truly beautiful thing, and there's something so wonderful about ending the album on such a note though, throughout all this turmoil and chaos and the incredibly depressing direction that this world seems to be heading in, expressed on this very album, that as people, we're not alone though, as we have each other, joined by our like-minded ideals and our love for each other, you know, expressed to us through loud, ecstatic doom music. And like even in all the chaos, you know, the chaos of the instrumentals, the chaos of the world, there's still beauty for those who push through and choose love over hate, I feel. And so to quickly summarise then, I'm just amazed by this album, truth be told. It's an album that captures such despair and anxiety, such depression, and the immense heavy weight of simply wanting to exist as is in a world that just seems to reject you at times, which is offset by this optimism and almost celebration of the fact that there is love in this world, that we can turn to each other and feel comfort. And I find the simple one-line explanation of the album on the Bandcamp page, it comes across so perfectly when one dives into the lyrics being presented on each and every track though, and you know, there's clearly a disdain for those who perpetuate the hate in this world, so evident in the lyrics. But there is something so comforting about the parts where we're told we're not alone. And it's a very dark, depressing message at times, but it's also truly beautiful at times. And I love how Hellish Form have created this absurdly impactful album that perfectly expresses these sentiments, at the same time, depressingly heavy and yet so joyful and ecstatic at the same time, essentially. And so, I think with that we've come to the end of our episode of Weird Music. I'm genuinely glad to have talked about one of my favourite releases of this current year. When I heard this one and really dived into it, just like each time I hear it, it just gets better and better for some reason, and it just amazes me the phenomenal funeral doomy instrumentals, offset by sludge music, and then it's incredibly impactful messages embedded deep in the shrieking black metal style vocal performances. Whether it is black metal or not, I don't know. I do apologise if it isn't, but it just sounds like that to me, and I think it's very cool. But what was wonderful is it all results in this really cohesive album experience that it perfectly straddles the line between devastation and just uplifting emotion so brilliantly. It's incredibly sad and angry at times, but there is a genuine joy at times as well, and it's a joy that is so much needed in these incredibly scary, tumultuous times. And so fair play to both Willow and Jacob for creating this wonderful album experience. Truly one of my favourites of this year, I would say. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best, take care, and bye bye for now. Bye bye.